And with that, I want to dive in, and we will have runners with microphones to get to questions. But to kick us off, when we started this film, the statistic was 36% of senior leadership was women. And when the film came out in 2017, we had already dropped to 27%. So in 18 months, we lost 9 percentage points, which is real and kind of scary, right? If we want to build a new industry, we want to make sure it looks like an actual representation of the world, right? We don't want, sorry, we love our white guys. We don't just want this run by white guys, right? We need to be inclusive. So I want to turn this over to Jasmine first, because you started, you were one of the co-founders of Women Grow. So how can we encourage more female leadership in cannabis? Or what's one thing that we could all do to try to encourage more women to be in cannabis?
This is the choir that has come to hear the answers to these questions that we've been answering for the last 4 years. So you already are doing the work already. You're talking to the women in your lives. That was the first step, right? To get out there and to talk to the women and have those real conversations with your mothers. My parents are here in the room tonight. So if you didn't have a great experience talking to your parents about cannabis, you can practice with my parents. They're much easier to work with. But there's so much knowledge on the stage. I don't want to even take it further than that. But start with your own conversations, your own families, your own communities.
Who else wants to dive in on that one? We've got business owners, we've got scientists, we've got technology, we've got policy people. Do you want to go?
I would encourage every investor that you get in front of to the reality of that. New York Times did a study several months ago that of every $58 million of investment money in all industry, women get 1 million. Wow. 58 to 1. So that number is going to continue to decline unless the world wakes up to, as Jasmine says, the balance and femininity in business, which is desperately needed.
Yeah. One of the bright spots, though, another study came out. Don't we love studies? But another one came out that said women do more with less. So you actually get more for your value and in a quicker turnaround time. So if you are in a position to invest, look at businesses run by women and people of color, because you get your money back faster, investors. Okay, let's talk a little bit about...
May I offer some hope for the future?
I was going to pass it to you next.
Perfect. So I do want to make one last note about this, which is that companies with diverse leadership perform better as well. It's not just that we do more with less. When you have a diverse set of voices in the room by any measure of diversity, then you are going to be a more successful company, hands down. At Students for Sensible Drug Policy, we are raising up the next generation of leaders for the cannabis industry and the drug policy reform movement. I'm incredibly honored to be able to do that work. And one of the things that's very exciting about that work is that the representation amongst typically underrepresented groups in this space at Students for Sensible Drug Policy is extraordinary. More than half of our leadership is women at Students for Sensible Drug Policy. More than 1% of the young people in our network identify as trans or genderqueer. We've got 38% of our leaders who identify as people of color. And for the first time ever last year, our membership survey reported that we have fewer cisgendered men, fewer people who identify as men in our network than we do women and people who don't identify on the gender binary. So the future is like bright. It's incredibly bright if we look at who's coming up next. But space is not going to be made unless we intentionally make it. So whether you're an entrepreneur or an investor, no matter who you are, every single time you walk into a meeting where you're asking somebody to partner with you in your business, ask the question, how are you making sure that diverse voices are represented in your boardroom? Every single time. And make that a qualification.
Thank you, Betty. Yep.
want to add something really quickly, which is that this issue is being addressed in a lot of different industries. And there's best practices out there that we could probably be adopting, you know, they usually have to do with measurement and then goal setting, right? And mentorship and stuff like that. So one of the things we could do as an industry, this is an NCIA thing, is we could create our own guidelines and recommendations and of how to use measurement to be successful in this area.
All right, I've got one last question, and then we'll open it up with some microphones running around if you have questions. So, one of the women in the film talks about that women bring compassion to the industry, but in speaking with all of you, I've also noticed that we bring resiliency and we bring flexibility to the industry, and I think you need both of those things. So I want to toss it to Jamie, because when we finished filming with you, you were just getting ready to embark on a new position, and you've already transitioned out of that. Things happen fast here. So talk about how resiliency has really helped you survive this industry.
I think when you think about an industry, you think about a lot of things. When you think about a new industry, you think about the ever-changing climate up to which an owner-operator, which is me, in this industry for many moons at this point. I own companies. I've had companies for 9 years under my belt, but the one thing that makes this most difficult is that it changes all the time, right? We legalized it on the medical side, then on the recreational side, and then the rules and regs change all the time. So I actually have been really good at adapting. But the one thing that has kept me really sort of moving forward in the industry is never to hold on to one idea of where I'll end up, which is kind of crazy. I have my hopes and dreams of where the fuck I want to go with it, but I've always been able to constantly adapt, right? So what we see are ancillary businesses moving forward in different positioning, and I like to educate myself in terms of what I'm fearful of. So I got the opportunity to work with a bunch of dudes in suits for about 3.5 years, and it was a lovely experience. I learned so much from those guys. I learned about accounting, I learned about publicly traded companies. When I first started this, we didn't even have access to capital, but I was so intimidated by those dudes in suits that I decided to work with them. And within 3 or 4 years, I'm a bit tenacious, I guess, I was offered a corner executive office and a really nice salary, and I walked away from it because I got from them what I learned. And from that, I'll continue to morph into who the fuck knows, but I will move forward. I only say that to you ladies in the room because there are a lot of states with a lot of opportunities. And the question that was addressed earlier in terms of women and what they need to do, you just need to get off your ass and just keep pushing for it. I didn't come from any Ivy League school, but I certainly was sitting at the table with a lot of dudes that did, and I can tell you they're not as smart as they seem. So, just some words of advice, ladies.
I came into this space with a vision of how it was all going to play out in the years down the line. I saw 10 years down the line, I saw 20 years down the line, and decided to just not pay attention to all the shiny objects. I could have had 50 different vape pens over the years. There's so much low-hanging fruit that everybody goes after, and you have a very quick market share, and then you're gone. So to be able to create a piece of the industry that's very forward-looking and saying, what needs can we fulfill, and have that ready with a solid foundation when the world wakes up to this, instead of just meeting that whole 18 to 34-year-old male on the recreational market. Because as the statistics show, those guys are already using the product, and they're going to continue using, and the numbers haven't really changed with legalization. What's changed is the 7 billion people on the planet with an endocannabinoid system now starting to look at cannabis as a potential option on the medical side, on the lifestyle side, on the wellness products. And that's kind of meeting my vision where it's been, but it's kind of like I feel like all these rocks have been thrown in the river, but I just keep on flowing.
Good job.
I know really quick there that Mara mentioned a term that we're now adopting. We're not using adult use or recreational anymore. It's now lifestyle. Yeah. It's lifestyle. It's about health and well-being. Start using it.
All right. I want to make sure we get to everybody on the panel, but I also want to open it up. So is there a pressing question from the audience? We've got a mic on that side and a mic on that side, so raise your hands. All right, we've got a mic flying in.
I'm pretty loud, but I guess the question, based on that statistic of capital investment for women, how did you all get your initial funding? Or not everybody has to answer. I mean, is it friends and family?
Juliana, you haven't chatted yet.
We started Auntie Dolores in 2008. Nobody was investing in cannabis in 2008. We weren't able to successfully raise money until 2014, and then it was with a group of cannabis investors. So obviously the opportunities are much more plentiful now than they were 10 years ago, and hopefully more so for women than they've ever been. Seems to be the case. So.
Okay, we had another question.
How does cannabis be affected with geoengineering, chemtrails, and also